Okay, strap in everyone, because today we're going to be redesigning the visuals of the live-action adaptation of Disney's The Little Mermaid, because despite endless potential and sky-high expectations for extravagance, the film was so visually underwhelming, the creative team lacked imagination and limited fantasy for the sake of naturalism, which just resulted in tonal inconsistencies and the absence of a wow factor. But I suggest you watch my other videos, especially my analysis on Ariel's costumes, to get more context as to why that is. I get into it a lot more there, but I just want to jump right into this video. Okay, so we're gonna start off with Triton's underwater kingdom, and oh god, Rob Marshall was sick for making the palace a clump of rocks. Even if he really felt the need to go that direction, he certainly could have made it more spectacular. This underwhelming design truly affects the whole feel of the film and makes the fantasy world feel so much smaller. So for our redesign, we're gonna go with a massive scope, epic scale, pure shimmery, glimmering, escapist grandeur, toweringly gorgeous, illuminating with ethereal, otherworldly magic, constructed with shining shell and pearl-like substances. There's absolutely no reason to skimp out. Aquaman had a smaller budget than The Little Mermaid, and it absolutely delivered on the opulent undersea fantasy, so there's literally no reason to not do this other than to make the film feel more bland, which, when you go that direction and don't just fully immerse into the aquatic fairy tale realm, then the iffy CGI stands out a lot more. And generally, we're gonna have all the underwater scenes have a lot more sea life and vegetation and not feel as barren and dull. Okay, moving on to Ariel's design, and like I said, I covered most of my thoughts on her look in my video specifically talking about her wardrobe and styling, so check that out, but I'll be adding some more polished additions and thoughts here. To summarize, Halle Bailey is the perfect Ariel, I've said it a million times, but the creative team did not support her fully, and she did most of the heavy lifting on her own. So first of all, we're of course going to have her hair more vibrant, so she's more distinguishable as Ariel, and people have as little reason as possible to point to her and say, that's not Ariel. And as for the mermaid look as a whole, the tail is perfect and probably the most fantastical thing in the whole film. We're just going to make changes to her top half. So this is my Ariel mermaid redesign. I wanted to keep the look fairly simple because that just works for Ariel, but I still wanted to make it look a lot more magical and stunning and distinctively Ariel. I not only have made her hair more vibrant, longer, put into a side part, and shaped to be a lot more voluminous, but I had to somehow make an homage to her iconic seashell top from the animated film that definitely works perfectly in the context of a cartoon, but needs some adjustments when translated into a live-action world. So I used the same material that was used for Triton's armor and shaped it to form around Ariel's ribcage so she can swim with no restrictions. I don't know if the edit here is able to perfectly capture my vision, as I'm not a Photoshop wizard, but that shell-like substance has such a striking iridescent quality to it. I also subtly added some shimmery scales to her cheekbones. I think it functions sort of like mermaid freckles and also works as a highlight, and just gives off a very striking but cute ethereal quality that I love, and it elevates the look without being too overdone or busy. It really works here. Now, let's redo Ariel's land looks. As I said in other videos, I do really like this blue dress. I think the dainty, feminine cottagecore vibes really complement Halle, and I particularly love the soft pink boots with the ribbons. But it's certainly not an extravagant enough look to be the only dress she wears for all 3 days she's on land, though we'll get to that. So this is my redesign of Ariel's village look. I replaced the awkward, out-of-place dinosaur scale headband with a pink satin ribbon that matches the laces of her boots. I also slightly deepened the overall shade of blue because sometimes it appears almost white, and I significantly deepened the blue on the corset just to add some contrast and dimension. The original dress's embroidery on the corset was not really appealing to me and certainly didn't pop, so I provided some new floral embroidery to match the pink of the headband and the boots, and it just really ties the look together, giving it a more cohesive feel. And as an alternative, I tried more simplistic embroidery inspired by sea life, which seems applicable. I mean, this isn't exactly to a T how I would make it look because of my limitations of resources and skills, but this is the general vibe we're going for. Ariel's honeymoon gown is very similar to the blue gown, so costume designer Colleen Atwood wasn't too keen on providing much variety, but it is still very lovely and I think it looks gorgeous on Hallie. Yet once again, it's too simple and lacks the wow factor to be her finale dress, so this is actually what I'd have the maids dress her in for her first day on land when she spends time with Eric in his library. The variety would be nice, and then for the finale she would be wearing something more extravagant, maybe even the teal gown that Ariel wears in the Disney parks and in merchandise but has never been worn in any actual film. This isn't the exact design I would go with, but this is the gist, I guess. I generally think all of Ariel's costumes should lean into that dainty, feminine cottagecore aesthetic, but implement interesting fabrics and also emulate oceanic shapes and textures like seashells and coral. And yes, we're giving Ariel her main pink ball gown. Yeah, we never would be insane enough to take her big Disney princess moment away from her. What a disservice that would be. I sloppily whipped up a random concept, but once again, I really didn't have the resources or the skill set to deliver what I wanted to do. It is what it is. However, we're gonna go with something different. My favorite costume piece in the whole film is Queen Selina's gown she wears at the engagement party. It's striking and elegant, it's extravagant without being out of place or over the top. The textures are so beautiful and are reminiscent of sea life. I love it, so we're gonna tweak it and give it to Ariel instead. I added big puff sleeves and altered the color, and oh my god, I love it, and we were robbed. Rob Marshall robbed us. Why did Rob rob us? This is freaking glorious. This is what Hallie deserved. Rob Marshall and Colleen Atwood will not be seeing heaven for depriving us of this, but giving Vanessa 3 different floor-length gowns even though she has 2 minutes of screen time, and it would be so simple to include this gown for Ariel. They could have just had the maids leave a gown for Ariel in her room for the engagement party, and she excitedly puts it on during the scuttlebutt instead of the blue dress. Or it would have even been more powerful for the maids to dress her after she discovers Eric is engaged to Vanessa, and she holds back tears as they doll her up in the gown. But honestly, I think a dinner scene or a ball scene would have been very necessary to have Ariel and the Queen interact and really establish their dynamic. Have the Queen and all the staff in the palace be won over by Ariel's quirks and charms, so it feels like a more natural arc for the humans and the mer people to unite in the end. It could have easily been added after the library scene or the kiss the girl scene. Eric and Ariel are late to Eric's birthday celebration. It would have significantly helped the film. But this video is strictly about design and not story, so I digress. As for the sparkling sea foam gown, I get why it wouldn't make sense for King Triton to design a dress himself on the spot from scratch. but he could have mended the blue gown, or in this case, with the direction we're going, the pink ball gown is what she would be wearing in the finale, and made it illuminate with a magical, otherworldly, iridescent glow. Or maybe instead, as Ariel's transforming, have the ocean water rise and then stream down her body until it fits her form, and then just becomes a metallic dress like the one Halle wore to the premiere, but without the seashell structure on the chest, because then it wouldn't be like Triton was actually designing anything but just letting the ocean mold to her body to cover her up. Or maybe he could have just let bubbling, flowing ocean water act as a gown as it drapes over her body while she emerges from the ocean and walks to get her blue gown to put on. I mean, there were so many opportunities here, they just weren't being creative or imaginative, and the excuse that her blue dress thematically represented life as a human for Ariel, it's just not powerful or effective enough to justify taking away the show-stopping moments. Okay, enough of that. Oh, but additional thought, we're also gonna let her wear an actual nightgown during the scuttlebutt scene, so yeah. Moving on to Ursula. Now, the body portion of Ursula's design is fine, but the makeup is atrocious. I mean, the obvious thing is that it's sloppy and uneven, and it's supposed to be inspired by drag makeup, but drag queens use much more precision and make their looks pop a lot more. And if this is drag makeup, they didn't commit really. It's very tame and boring, and they ultimately played it very safe when it comes to the design of Ursula. And it just doesn't look cinematic at all, and Melissa McCarthy herself also doesn't feel very cinematic, which leads to Ursula's scenes feeling tonally inconsistent, and for me, out of place. I really think they should have done more to make her look not like Melissa McCarthy. I want prosthetics, I want a transformation into the character of Ursula. So this is my redesign of Ursula. With this approach, Melissa McCarthy would be wearing prosthetic cheekbones and subtle fangs like Angelina Jolie did for Maleficent, as well as a prosthetic, more angular, sharp nose. And once again, this edit does not fully convey the vision, it just sort of gets the point across. There's still drag-inspired makeup here, but more extravagant, precise, and intimidating without being super campy or silly. The most notable thing here is probably the octopus texture I added to her skin. I don't think I fully achieved what I attempted to. The idea though was to not make her makeup look grotesque, but give her more visual intrigue by adding a smooth, sleek octopus spot pattern that kind of was reminiscent of freckles rather than something more monstrous, because I think Ursula should still be regal and majestic and even beautiful in a sense. So yeah, that was the idea, but what we actually got in the film was boring, safe, sloppy, and not very cinematic. As for Flounder, his design was controversial and stirred up quite a media frenzy, which I personally think was mostly just a scapegoat to justify hating on the film when the real reason was racism. I don't particularly love or downright hate the design, but like, realism isn't the problem here. If you want more cartoony looking animals like in Alvin and the Chipmunks movies, we crave very different things from live action adaptations. I want to see what these characters look like in the real world, and if I wanted a cartoon, I would watch the animation. Obviously, you can exaggerate some features to make them emote more, which is very necessary, but I want to be able to believe what I'm seeing to some degree. So this is my Flounder redesign, which makes him more distinguishable as the character, more vibrant, more plump, and though he's a realistic fish, he can believably be expressive. And when it comes to Sebastian and Scuttle, I honestly don't have a problem with their designs. I mean, could you imagine being tasked with bringing a lovable talking crab into a photorealistic world? That would be difficult as hell, and I don't know any other way they could have successfully done it. And while I don't love that Scuttle is a diving bird instead of a seagull, because when she's underwater it comes across as very bizarre and jarring, and I know it's to allow Ariel to go to the surface for the first time after the part of your world sequence so it has more impact, but it doesn't have enough impact to make up for how weird it is seeing a bird talking underwater. And it's also quite the coincidence that the first time Ariel ever goes to the surface, a shipwreck occurs the first time. So yeah, I digress again. Moving on. Now, let's talk about Eric. And you may be thinking, how could there be anything wrong with this character design? It's so basic and simple. That's exactly my point. It's so boring, which doesn't need to be the case just because he's a dude. I often think about the prince in 2015 Cinderella and how his costumes were so lovely, and they weren't afraid to put him in very soft looks and colors and fabrics. He had a feminine quality to his designs that made him more appealing and striking. I think Jonah Hauer King's Prince Eric would have greatly benefited from this same thing, but at the very least they should have at least put some sort of embroidery or pattern on his clothing. Just this simple floral addition makes him look significantly more charming and allows him to still dress more casually without being so bland and boring. And even this little shell embroidery design is adorable on him. But yeah, there aren't really any other designs that bother me enough to completely redesign, but just imagine how glorious and spectacular the film could have been with even a fraction of these design changes. It would have provided the grandeur, the opulence, and extravagance one would hope for in a Disney mermaid princess fantasy film. I think it's just eating away at me how much potential was left on the table with this film, especially with the perfection of Halle Bailey as Ariel. So hopefully she gets supported better in a future project as the character, which really needs to happen. So let me know all your thoughts, and were my designs just crap? Or did you like them better? I think they were significantly better. So, love ya, bye.